In today's episode, I build an incline, install the upper level, and deal with an unexpected problem. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to episode 4 of building a TT120 model railway. The layout is going to take a major step forward today, so lots of exciting stuff coming up. But before we jump in, I do just want to say a huge thank you to the Model Centre for sponsoring this series. As always, I'll be talking more about them later on. But yeah, there's a lot to cover today. In the previous episode, I started work on building the upper level and managed to lay all the track for that on a separate baseboard. Well, now it's time for that whole section to be installed on the main layout and also to join up the track too so that trains can move from one level to the other. It doesn't really sound all that complicated when you say it like that, but believe me, there were some unexpected curveballs. So here is the layout as we left it in the previous episode. You can see the upper level has been built, but so far it's just sitting on top of the main layout and the track isn't connected at all. In order to allow trains to move from the main part of the layout to this upper level, I'll need to build an incline, and this is where things get tricky as trains aren't really designed to run up steep gradients. Now, to make the incline as smooth as possible, I'm using these Woodland Scenics risers. Essentially, these are sections of polystyrene that gradually get higher at a consistent incline, and that's really going to give trains the best chance of making it up this hill. This section will run outside of the main circuits on the right hand side of the layout, and the way these polystyrene inclines are made, they can easily be bent to follow the curve. And they can just be glued down using some PVA. The first incline section is then pressed down into the glue before I add weight to hold it in place. Don't worry about that little section that's hanging over the edge there, I'll trim that off once this is dry. I'll then continue working my way round the curve, adding in the following incline sections. The weights not only press the polystyrene down into the glue for good contact, but they also help keep the shape of the curve that I want too. And for anyone wondering, in this case I'm using a 3% gradient. Ideally, the lower the number the better, so Woodland Scenics also make a 2% gradient. However, for this layout I did have to go with the 3% one in order to get the track high enough so that it could cross over the main line at the end of this section. With the incline being held nicely in position, I'll spread some PVA glue over the top surface ready to add some cork. And this will just keep it consistent with the rest of the layout. As in previous videos, I've cut the cork into 2 strips so that I can bend it round the curve more easily. And once I've done the inside edge, I'll add the outer edge too. Again, all this is weighted down to hold it in place and stop any bumps appearing. With the glue dry, that excess at the very front can then just be trimmed away. And since it's made from polystyrene, as you would expect, it's really easy to remove. Now, I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to the Model Centre for sponsoring this series. As I'm sure you know, TMC are one of the stockists for Hornby's TT120 range, so it's one of the few places where you can get both the Pico and the Hornby TT products from the same place, which I'm sure you'll agree is very handy if you're building a TT layout. And of course they've got everything you need from a Scenics point of view too, like a ballast or foliage, so they really have everything you need to build a model railway. It really annoys me when you're putting together an order of stuff you need for a layout and then you discover that they don't have one specific thing you need, so you've got to go somewhere else to get that, and yeah, That just isn't the case with TMC because they seem to have everything. You can see for yourself by checking out their website, themodelcenter.com. I'll put a link to that down in the description too, so you can just click on that once you're done watching this video. And yeah, thank you so much to TMC for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video series. Okay, back to the layout. Meanwhile, I've put together a couple of sections of flexi track which I've already bent to follow the shape of the curve. With the track in place, I'll connect this up to the turnout from the main line. And you can see I've already soldered feeder wires onto these two sections as well, so now I'll drill some holes to allow these to pass through the baseboard. The wires can then be pulled down from underneath. Now, I'm not going to fix this track down just yet, because first I want to test if a loco with a train can actually run up this incline. As you can see, the A3 here starts off fairly well, but as it has to take the weight of those three coaches, it starts to wheel slip and eventually comes to a stop around 2/3 of the way up. This obviously isn't great, since it means trains can't actually make it to the upper level. Now, I could run shorter trains so that there's less weight, but I'd prefer to be able to run 3-coach trains, so I've got a backup plan up my sleeve. With the track removed, you can see here I'm adding PVA glue to the surface of the cork. That is in preparation for the DCC Concepts power base. Now, essentially, these are little metal plates that sit underneath your track, which is what you can see I'm adding here. You then also add some very small magnets to the underside of the locos. Those magnets will be attracted to the metal plates under the track, pulling the locos down into the rails to give it much more adhesion. In theory, this should allow the trains to make their way up the incline at any pace I choose, but I've never actually done this before, so this is all new to me. You can see the power base plates also have little fishtails on each end, which allows them to interlock with each other and also follow whatever curves you might have, which is a really neat piece of design there. So now that I've got all the plates installed, I can remove that protective cover from the top. All you need to do is lift one of the corners and then gradually peel away the film. And as you would expect, this is a very satisfying process. I'm going to glue the track down in place too, and I'm just using PVA for this, which is what DCC Concepts recommend. I'm just adding a little bit to the underside of the sleepers, not every single one though, that would be overkill. For the gap at the track joint, I've actually added PVA to the bottom of the rails themselves, and that's so I can fit a few of the joiner sleepers in place to hide the gap. The track can then be put in place on the incline over those metal plates. And again, I'll put some weight on all this to hold the track down while it dries. For the second time, the feeder wires can then be pulled through the holes in the baseboard. And of course, these are going to be joined up to the main power bus so that I don't have to rely on power travelling along the rails, it'll have a direct feed instead. So let's give the A3 another test and see if this has made any difference. Well, that is definitely an improvement. It's running up there really nicely now, no wheel slip at all, and it's made it all the way along to the end of the section of track, which is fantastic. I'll try running it even slower now, and this is going to be a really tough test as at a low speed the train doesn't have as much momentum to carry it up the hill. You can see though it's absolutely fine, and this means we can run trains at a nice controlled speed into the station that will be at the end of this incline. Speaking of which, that station is the next thing to be installed, so let's get on with that. So it's almost time to fix this upper level permanently to the main baseboard, but first there's one little thing to do. You may remember in the previous episode I ran all the wires on this section to a D-sub connector so that I can connect it electrically to the rest of the layout. Well, now I need to make a hole in the main baseboard for the ribbon cable to pass through and connect up to the wiring underneath. With a position marked out, I'll drill 2 holes a small distance apart. I can then use the Dremel to cut away the wood between these 2 holes. And with a little help, I can open up a slot for the wire. So now I can finally attach the upper level to the rest of the layout, and I need to make sure that this section is fixed to the main baseboard at the same height as the end of the incline. To do that, I've created these laser cut supports, which are exactly the same height minus the depth of the plywood that the track sits on. Now these are a very simple construction. Essentially it's a capital I with some braces at the corner to make them nice and strong. And being laser cut, all of them will be an identical height, so much more consistent than anything I could make myself. You can see I've already glued some of these to the underside of the upper level, so now it's time to fit the whole thing in place. With PVA glue on the bottom of those supports, the whole section can just be maneuvered into position. And as always, I'll add some weight to make sure all the supports are making good contact with the baseboard. You can see there's not a lot of room underneath, which is why I wanted to fit all the point motors and wiring ahead of time, but there is just enough space to be able to connect up the ribbon cable. And the one under the main baseboard is connected up too. Currently I only have track power running to this, but eventually I'll run the cables for the point motors and uncouplers too. Speaking of track power, let's see if we actually have any coming through to this part of the layout. I'm turning up the controller now and success! Yeah, the loco is moving nicely there, which is fantastic, so that means my wiring has all worked. One other thing to mention as well is that the uncoupling ramps I installed last episode were made from piano wire. Now that I've added magnets under some of the locos though, this was causing them to get stuck on the ramps because the magnets were attracted to that wire. So instead I've remade the ramps using copper wire instead, which of course isn't magnetic. I also improved the design slightly with the knowledge I got from doing it the first time round, and that's made the wire a bit more discreet. So it's that point in the video where I just want to quickly remind you that if you're enjoying this series and you want to see what happens next, well, you can watch the next episode right now by becoming a channel member. It only costs £1.99, so less than the price of a coffee. I think that's a pretty good deal. And of course, I should say as well that when you do get early access to the new videos, there's no ads on them at that point, so you can watch them completely uninterrupted. I don't really make enough of that benefit, so I'm trying to mention it more often. Of course, you get loads of other perks as well. You can see what all of those are by clicking the join button below this video, or there's a link in the description too for those of you on mobile. Don't worry, it doesn't take any money from you until you're absolutely certain, so you can click that link and have a look around before you make a decision. But yeah, like I said, if you want to see what happens next with this layout build, well, you can watch the next episode right now by becoming a member and supporting the channel. The upper level is now in place, but we have a bit of a gap where the track needs to cross over the main line. Originally, the plan was to have this be the start of a tunnel, but for a bit of variation, I've decided to go with a bridge here instead. This deck has been laser cut from 2mm MDF with a couple of strengthening beams underneath to keep it all rigid, and this whole thing is just glued in place. Now that I know the position of the end of the bridge deck, I'll add in some sections of cork to this little gap here too. And because the cork is the same thickness as the deck, it means I'll have a nice smooth transition as the track runs over the bridge. And again, everything is weighted down while drying, using whatever will fit in this particular space. Even though the track is leveling out here, I'm still going to add the power base plates underneath this section since the weight of the carriages will still be on the incline at this point. So with the PVA glue down, the plates are once again fitted in position. And the nice thing about working on this upper level means that I can have trains running around the main circuits while I'm doing this. Before fitting the joining piece of track in place, I'll just drill a hole for the remaining feeder wires. And then the track is fitted into place. Now I know I haven't removed the backing from the power base yet, this was just a test fit, but I did go back and remove it later before fixing the track in place permanently. The wires can then be pulled through the hole that I just drilled so that everything is connected up to the main power bus. And with that, we should be done, so let's see if we can run a train all the way from the lower level up to the top station. So here we've got the A4 starting its journey up the incline, and so far it's all good. And now it's onto that new section I just laid and heading over the bridge too, and yeah, this looks so good, especially with the trains passing underneath. And then we come into the station, running into platform 3 at the moment, right at the front of this section, and yeah, looking down the length of this, you can see it's going to be quite a station when all the scenics are done. So with the A4 having arrived, let's now have another train depart from the other platform. A nice smooth pull away from the A3 there as it heads out over all these points that lead into the station. And then again on the bridge, yeah, it just looks great. And of course I will be adding some sides to this in the future when I do the scenics for this area. So as the train runs down the incline to join the main line, I think we can consider this a huge success. I'm so glad that everything runs properly on the upper level, and I'm glad that the incline is working without issue too. The whole thing really adds another dimension to the layout, both figuratively and literally, so it's great to see this major section installed. We are starting to come to the end of the track laying process on this layout now. There's only the shunting yard left to do, and that's all going to be in the next episode. I've actually had a bit of a rethink on how I'm going to do the yard, and of course if you want to see that episode right now, you can become a channel member to watch it straight away. In the meantime though, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and here's what you've got to look forward to in the future. I start building the shunting yard, add in a goods shed, and cut away other parts of the layout.